Make sure you stick around for the whole episode because we're going to take a deep dive into lowbrow art. And I just might regret asking about a killer car.
You're listening to the Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast with John CustomCarNerd Meyer and Jason Old Car Guy Carr. We'll be bringing you gearheads everything you never wanted to know about cars and why they should be on the road and not in your garage. Are you ready to get out and drive?
Well, welcome back to another fantabulistic episode of the Get Out and Drive podcast. I am John, CustomCarNerd Meyer.
And I am Jason, Old Car Guy Carr.
Today we have Richard Kuehl, world-renowned. He's laughing already.
Yes.
World-renowned lowbrow pinstripe artist. Thanks for hanging out with us, Richard.
Oh, no problem.
You don't have anything else to do today, right?
No.
He doesn't have anything to do.
So, Richard, it's great to finally meet you kind of face-to-face. We've been
Yes.
liking each other's posts on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, and we've been following along a little bit of what you do. I'm particularly struck by the license plates, but that's a whole nother topic. I guess we just kind of want to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and what you call yourself on Instagram and all that stuff so people can find you.
Okay, so across all my socials, I'm STLPinstripes, just mostly because I'm here in St. Louis, and I think goofy pinstriper nicknames are kind of goofy and silly and played out. Sorry, everybody. But I thought that was kind of silly, so I'm just me pinstriping things. Mostly it's found, repurposed old junk that I pick up at swap meets and flea markets and yard sales. Just stripe oddball things, random junk that I find. And then it's weirdos, pinstripes, Mr. Horsepower, the same thing that everybody's doing for the past 60 years. I'm doing the same thing. Mostly it's a hobby. It just started out as something to keep me busy, keep me out of trouble. We have winter here in the Midwest, so sometimes you just don't want to go outside and you get tired of watching TV or something. So to stave off cabin fever, it's keeps me busy, keeps my mind occupied, and that's kind of it.
I know, Richard, that I've seen a lot of things that you've repurposed.
Yes.
And you've repurposed things that I have painted previously and I couldn't sell. and you put your spin on it and the thing sold like in a minute. I think I know you say it's because everybody's been doing the same thing for 60 years, but I see that you're putting your own spin on it with the detail and with all sorts of different things. Tell us a little about the detail and what's making it your own.
I think that mostly what my style is, I grew up, reading comic books. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I paint, is what I saw in comic books, learning to draw mm-hmm. and ink and paint and lay pages and panels out. Because that's what I did as a kid, through high school. I'd sit and copy comic books. I'd just take a comic book and decide to copy that page out of the comic book. That comes from, you're antisocial and don't have friends. You draw and do art. So, that's how I paint, is kind of very similar to techniques that you use drawing comic books and things like that, the same kind of inking and line weight techniques. So that's where a lot of that comes from. And that's what everybody does. They find their niche, mm-hmm. do what they like, do what's comfortable for them. And if other people like it, that's great. If they don't, it hangs on my wall and I have something cool to stare at.
Well, you mentioned, about jokingly, of course, antisocial and all that stuff. But one of the things that artists,
you don't know me, that ain't a joke.
One of the things that artists tend to do is they tend to find that niche, and they instantly attract people who like what it is that they're doing. So I know that you're hitting some trade shows and some swap meets and stuff like that. So are you doing any live painting while you're at these shows?
No, I haven't worked up the nerve to do that. I don't like an audience in particular. I feel really uncomfortable just doing the time-lapse kind of videos that I put out there. I don't know why, but in my brain, if somebody stands over my shoulder and watches me, I might lose my mind, and it drives me nuts to have an audience. It really does. I like to show a finished thing, because the one thing that's going to drive me nuts and make me lose my mind is that if someone goes, Put a line over there. Why'd you use that color? Or something. I'm like, I'll lose it. So I'm not comfortable enough to paint in front of people. It just I've had many a broken down car in a parking lot and had someone try to tell me how to fix my car, and that didn't go so well. So I know how to bite my tongue and just keep fixing my car, but I don't know if I feel up to that. So
it goes without saying, Richard's not going to be the airbrush artist at Six Flags. He's not going to be in the little cubicle doing airbrush art for Tina with a sunset. So,
yes.
Yes. I'd probably say no.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Have you been branching out? And I know everything you've been doing is very much personal. Everything you do comes from your head. Have you been doing any commission pieces? I know that kind of goes to where people say, put this color here, put this color there, but do you do that?
I've done a few pieces. I have a lot of people that ask. That's the thing. A lot of people will ask, and then as soon as you tell them it costs dollars, they don't care so much anymore. So I'm very particular about doing commission pieces. I make sure that I sit down with somebody and go, look, what do you want? I'm not going to spend 12 hours painting this thing. And then you go, I don't know. It's not exactly what I thought it'd be. So like, look, we need to have several conversations about what exactly you want. And then I'll paint this. And then when it's done, maybe I can fix a few things, but that again, commission things drive me nuts, because you can spend 12 hours on something and then someone goes, I don't know, I just don't like it. Oh, okay. What about it don't we like? What are we changing? What needs to be different? And it stops making it fun and makes it nerve-wracking. And it puts a lump in my belly to think about, oh God, is this person going to want this? And it just, that makes me nervous, and that makes me scared, and that makes it not fun. It makes it not a hobby. And if it's not fun, if it's not something I can relax and do and just go, hey, that, I can mess around with it. And at the end, I hold it out and I go, hey, that's cool. I like that. That's great. That relieves stress. That helps. That's fun.
And commission artwork, to some degree, really is on a little bit, I shouldn't say a little bit, probably a grander scale than doing a full body restoration for somebody. You still got to have those conversations to find out the details they want and don't want. You got to know their style. You got to know, how far they're willing to go, what they're willing to pay in some cases. So I guess what I want to know is, you talked about copying comic books at a young age, but was there any one or two particular people that inspired you to kind of maybe branch off the comics and move into maybe the pinstriping and or the graphics of that sort?
I always liked, I know everybody says it's Rat Fink and Ed Roth. I always leaned more towards, I liked the work of Bill Campbell, doing the Revell model kits and all of that stuff. There was kind of a kitschiness about that really originally drew me in to that, to everything. And, Rat Fink and Von Dutch and Flying Eyes and all that stuff. I can't say that I was expressly exposed to one guy in particular. You just sort of absorb a lot of things. You're a kid and you go to a car show and there's a guy with a flying eye on his car. And you're like, hey, that's cool. And then you notice that 50 other people have the same thing on their car. And you go, well, what is this? Why is there flying eyes on everyone's car? You see Rat Fink and you go, well, what is Rat Fink? And then you learn about that. But, just that kind of googly-eyed monster cartoon style is what really drew me in, and what made, I like those things. I like the Mopar art of the late 60s, early 70s, all of those kind of mod disco, purples and greens and orange, advertisements that they ran in the late 60s, early 70s for Dusters and Roadrunners and all that. That stuff is cool to me. It's kitschy, it's different, and it's not the same old. So I lean towards those kind of things too. And that's, it's just where I kind of land in the spectrum of things I like.
I know you've done a lot of work on repurposed things, and we've seen a lot of license plates and bowling pins and all sorts of things. Where do you get all this stuff?
Flea markets and swap meets and yard sales, and you go around and you hunt through the pile of garbage, and you find things and you go, that's neat, and it just kind of go, I could do something with that, and that's where you land with things. Sometimes you buy something and it sits in a corner for 6 months because you're like, I thought that was really neat when I bought it. Now it's just kind of stupid. So you wait for inspiration to strike you and go, oh, that's cool.
So you'll kind of get something and have, when you see it, you have a vision of what's going on, or you just say, I think this piece has potential?
I think this has potential.
Okay.
This is neat. This is different. Old wood saws, there's, everybody paints on old wood saws. They're neat. You hang them on the wall. They're different. It's not a rectangle in a frame with a landscape painted on it. So
it's not something you'll find at Branson with a waterfall and a water wheel.
No. But it's, those kind of things are neat. If it's interesting, it hangs on the wall and you walk by and you look at it and you go, that's cool. And I think that's how it is for a lot of people. You look at something and go, hey, that's neat. There's wood saws, any kind of old petroleana, that's the fancy name for old oil cans.
Right.
That's
$5 word for junk.
Yes. $5 word for junk. But, that kind of stuff, anything that lends itself towards cars and automobiles, wrenches, tools, machetes and axes, that kind of stuff looks neat. It's tough guy stuff. It hangs on the wall, and it's different from the Bugs Life poster hanging on your basement wall.
Right.
So as I grab my cool drink here from my Racing Junk koozie, it reminds me that I think there's some things that people can get at Racing Junk that you do. Why don't you fill us in on that?
Yeah, at racingjunk.com, they have the free classifieds. So I have a few items there. They're exclusive to the Racing Junk classifieds. So if they go there and they search for them, I'm not exactly sure how the search function works there. It's new to me. But you can find a few of my pieces there on the Racing Junk classifieds. There is a link from my website.
And if you guys are looking for anything automobilia related, car parts, racing parts, make sure you guys check out racingjunk.com. They're longtime sponsors of the Get.Out.N.Drive podcast.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier your socials and things. Make sure that everyone gets that again so they know where to find you and your website and everything. Yeah,
STLPinstripes across all of my socials. So if you search that, you'll find me on Facebook, Insta, YouTube, LinkedIn, and then STLPinstripes.com is the website. Pretty simple, straightforward, easy to find.
Very cool. Well, we'll have to make sure you have some sort of scrolly pinstripe Get Out and Drive logo artwork or something that we can get done.
Just like on the side of a dump truck?
Yes, right on the side of a dump truck. Just a dump truck, trash truck, vintage stagecoach.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Like every other artist, pieces are numbered or signed and things. Do you hide your name on your work?
Not really. No. I mean, I don't put it out in front and center, but it's down in the corner. It's just RLK, my initials, and then usually put a year on it. And that's,
very cool.
Easy enough.
I know, Richard, you said you are very interested in lowbrow art and pinstriping and all that type of stuff. And I love the weirdos. A muscle car with this giant angry monster coming out of it and everything. Where did pinstriping and lowbrow art and things like that, where do you think that came from? Or can you give our listeners a little bit of history of that?
Sure. So, the stories I always read was that, the Barrises and, Roth and all these guys, they're out building cars. And the story I always heard, and I want to believe is true, is that to hide their sanding scratches and shrunk up bodywork, because, oh my God, they weren't perfect. They would have Von Dutch come in and stripe over the places where there was shrunk up bodywork or sanding scratches
or rock chips
or rock. And he would stripe over those things. And that's why a lot of his stuff is kind of goofy and crazy, because he's hiding mistakes under his stripes. and pinstriping goes way back, goes to sign painting. Sign painting goes back to stage, painting scroll work on stagecoaches and things like that. And stagecoaches are nothing but cars with horses in front of them.
Right.
And it just all comes forward, and how you choose to apply a skill set to a new medium is, where I think a lot of that, pinstriping kind of comes from. It's horseless carriage up to the new horseless carriage, horse carriage up to horseless carriage,
right,
kind of thing.
And to me, it kind of evolved out of, just as hot rodding did, World War II, pinstriping, nose art, having to paint planes, things like that, and putting numbers on planes. All that stuff was done by hand.
Yeah,
it certainly wasn't vinyl decals. It was great to see a giant picture of some gal riding a bomb.
Yeah.
and all that stuff kind of evolved out into the hot rodders and everything that evolved obviously out of World War II with everything, and all of the pinstriping from airplanes came along with it. Yeah.
You bring that stuff home with you, like, sign painting and painting, numbers on planes and things like that. It just, you bring that home with you, and you go, you're sitting around looking at your car and you go, I did this in the Army. I did this in the Air Corps.
Right.
I can paint numbers on my car. I can paint flames on my car. And, it just all lends itself from there. It was once a very utilitarian thing becomes an artistic thing.
Well, it's funny how you mentioned about hiding mistakes, because on my 79 Chrysler Cordoba, my dad painted that car. My dad is not a professional by no means, but the day that we were taping off the two colors, the two-tone, on one door, we got that little curve that goes up on the B pillar just off from the other side. And it was years later that I had it pinstriped, and the pinstriper, when he came in, he says, I can fix that. And of course he did, just by drawing the line thicker as it went around the corner on that side. He went over the other side and matched the thick line. And like I said, to the untrained eye, they would never know. We know it's there. But it's one way to correct small mistakes, maybe big ones. But I can also remember as a kid walking down the front street of my town, and the local grocery store, you would see, the newsprint painted specials of the week on the big windows. And they would have, the fancy stars and the little squigglies and this and that. And I think with technology that's out today, with, digital printing, vinyl cutting, all that sort of thing has kind of taken a lot of that artwork out of modern day advertising. So those people who learned to do the paintings and the pinstriping and this and that, they've just kind of gone away, or that art has died off with an aging population. So as technology kind of comes into play, there's still a few people like yourself who really want to showcase that this art is still alive. Is there something in particular that you do that kind of keeps your mind active, or is it just you're just constantly doing something to keep going with your art?
I think just, practice makes perfect. Everything is practice. What I think is something that was really good yesterday, I might think in a month that, what you did yesterday is garbage compared to what you're going to do tomorrow, because you just keep painting and working at it. And I always feel like what I've done is not as good as something maybe I've done more recently. So it comes from that. It comes from staying, just, keeping your mind sharp, paying attention to everything, cataloging everything, even if you don't realize you're doing it. You look at cars, you look at posters, other people's work, and you pull ideas from anywhere and everywhere, and what works, what doesn't work for me personally, what I think is cool, combining different things. There are so many guys that, you combine things like anime and comic books, and then you pull that into hot rod art, and you have an anime hot rod art kind of thing going on. And there's all of that stuff out there. There's so many more sources now to pull from to make things, to have inspiration for, I guess is lack of a better word, but to catalog and keep those ideas in the back of your mind. And you keep them back there, and you don't even know they're there until you go and you make something and you go, oh, that's what I do with that idea.
Do you see that your work kind of is a culmination of your love of anime? Because I see the detail that's in some of your work that I don't see in other people's work.
Well, and see, like my work, like a lot of people go, oh, there's a lot of detail there. For me, that is how, I look at it, and there, are guys like Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld who were really popular in the late 90s, early 2000s that were drawing comic books. And I feel that that's kind of a lot of how, where I was coming into my stride as far as, that was my time in high school was, and when I was really drawing and reading comic books, and that artistic style is in my painting. And to me, though, it's less detail and more of, oh, if I do a lot of the, like, more is better. So like I paint with a broad strokes when I do color. And then when I go in and I do that detail work that is the black kind of detail things, I feel like I'm covering mistakes, or I'm adding that detail. And it's not so much, it's almost like cheating kind of, to add that detail in, because it feels easy to me to put that detail in with just a fine line and some black paint, and you can do it. You can accomplish a lot of depth. You can accomplish a lot of shade and shadow with, line weight and hatching and things like that. And so it feels kind of like I'm cheating a lot sometimes on things. I see other guys that mix and do have different styles, and I think that seems like a lot of work. And what I do feels a lot easier than what they do, Now,
when I look at it, it does look like a lot of work, and it looks like a culmination of styles that you have because of your love for anime. And I see that detail in your work that I don't see in other people's work. And I think it's really cool.
Well, I think it's cheating because I'm doing it with one color instead of sitting there blending out a palette and blending from dark gray to a really light gray, or blending from one color to another.
Right.
I'm not working with that wet color, and I'm not, like, it doesn't look realistic or kind of
right.
I'm not doing that shade and
but
shadow.
But you're rainbow affecting it.
Yeah, kind of.
It's blended with solid colors.
Yeah, I mean, there's that cartoon. It's more of a cartoony style of like, here's red and here's dark red. So dark red instantly means shadow.
Yes.
And that it feels cheap to me. It's just, it's that cartoon kind of, if there's something that's light red and there's something that's dark red, then instantly that's a shadow and that kind of thing. And then you go in, and maybe if you forgot to shadow something, or you want it to look round, you do that with lines instead of color.
Well, that's cool. I've learned a lot watching you paint, and I've learned a lot watching things, especially, with anime. I realize that real people, unless they're odd, they don't have blue hair,
well,
or blue and black hair, or no hair.
People are out there.
They are out there. I was always at work when I worked in auto restoration, and I was always by myself, and I was over in the corner, and I was working on this nasty, busted tray table, eating lunch on this tray table all the time, and I wanted to be left alone. And I never went up to the lunchroom, and I'd always sit and eat on this dirty, nasty table that I've drilled holes in and built cars on and all sorts of things. So Richard makes me this for Christmas. Richard made me this really cool thing. And it says, F off, I'm eating. And it shows a whole bunch of other stuff, the flying eyeball and the food and all sorts of everything. I was scared to bring it to work to use it. So I have brought it home, since retired, but brought it home, and I think I'm going to pour, now that it's dry, I think I'm going to pour clear resin over the top of it so I can actually use it. But it sure is badass, and it's made just from an old busted tray table. Part of exactly the same thing he does to repurpose things. And like we always say, the hot rodders, they're the original recyclers. So Richard Kuehl is saving the planet.
Right.
I can certainly say that.
Keeping things out of the landfill.
Keeping things out of the landfill.
So for those of you guys who are actually listening to this and not watching the interview, they just held up the tray table, and I'm about to hold up this old license plate from 1956 here in New Brunswick. So this is something along the lines, Richard, that you would find maybe at a swap meet that looks like a perfect canvas. In this case, the paint's gone around the crest here. So that's probably a great area for you to put maybe a set of moon eyes or a rat or the flying eyeball or something like that. Tell us a little bit about, what inspiration comes with a specific license plate. Is it the patina on it? Is it maybe just Tell us a little bit about how you get there.
Well, I originally started painting license plates because they were cheap and plentiful, and they were a small canvas. So that was kind of why I started doing those, because I had some laying around, and I think just about everybody has a dozen or so old license plates. I just thought it would be a neat thing because everybody paints their car, and some people are secret customizers or secret hot rodders where they're not going to paint something crazy on their car. They don't want that kind of attention. They don't want that. But if that's something small like their license plate, a little just pop of something, a weirdo or some flying eyes or something on your license plate, that way it's not necessarily on your car. Forever. You're not stuck with it. It's kind of a low key nod to have, to hot rodding and weirdos and custom everything. But it's low key, because some people, they don't want that nutty. They don't want a rat fink painted on their hood, or they don't necessarily want pinstripes. They outwardly, they say that stuff's silly, and they don't want it on their perfectly restored car. But if it's on their license plate, well, then it's just, it's not part of the car so much.
It's like wearing a rat fink tie to and a perfectly good suit.
Yes.
Or hiding your tattoo under a sock.
Yeah.
Yes.
That kind of thing. So that's where, that's kind of what I had. The idea for those was, it was a little nod. It's something you could click on your car to show and walk away, and it's just a little pop of interest to your car. It's something you can just hang up in your office. It's not a big obnoxious piece. It's something easy that if you wanted to hang it in the office or at home, and it's something small, but yet it's there. You know what it is. It's cool, and it doesn't take up an entire wall too, because you get some things like saws or other pieces, you have to have a shelf, or you have to have a wall, or maybe the family thinks it's stupid and they don't know why it's hanging on the wall. But if it's low key, that you can kind of stick it in a corner and it's yours and enjoy it. So that's what I was kind of started out with those plates, was they were just small, and it was kind of a low key nod to, hey, I'm a hot rodder kind of thing, but very low key.
John, did you get a chance to get out and drive last weekend?
I did. I drove to Gateway Classic Cars in O'Fallon, Illinois to meet with Eliza. She's part of the public relations team at Gateway Classic Cars. I took a tour and joined Eliza for her Facebook segment, Live with Eliza.
How can we see Live with Eliza with our own John Meyer as a special guest star?
We'll be sure to put a link on our site, Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast, and across our social media feeds when it's available.
So, Richard, speaking of license plates and cars, I'm always interested to find out what type of cars our guests drive. So, from what I understand, you've got a pretty special car. Tell us a little bit about
it. I have a 64 Olds 98 coupe. And really, it's just kind of a nice little survivor car. It is not restored. It's a beater. I knock around in it, go to the grocery store, go to the swap meet, run down the street in it. It's a neat little car. Now, the story behind it, and I choose to believe this is true. At least this is what the fella who I bought it from told me, and it does have the battle scar to prove it. In the hood of the car, in the left front side of the hood, is a large gash in the hood, and it's about 6 inches long. So the guy who I bought it from tells me, he goes, the previous owner, he had stuck an axe, got mad at the car and sunk an axe into the hood of the car. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, well, and I said, that's okay, whatever. And so then he tells me the real story. So apparently this guy owned the car. He knocked around in it. He drove it, and he murdered his family with an axe. Got mad at the car. He went in, he axe murdered his family. Then he sunk the axe in the hood of his car, and then he waited for the cops to show up. And apparently he had mental problems and things like that. The trunk of the car was filled with his notebooks of things that the voices in his head were telling him to do. and that there were gremlins and monsters and demons in his head telling him to axe murder his family and do other things. And so he also could possibly believed in some of the writings. The guy told me that he, believed that it was the car that was telling him to do things, stuff like that. So I choose to believe that's true because that's a really neat story, and it does have the battle scar to prove it. The guy who I bought it from said he bought the car from a police auction online, and that was in the auction, the online auction that was in there, that this was, seized. It was part of this investigation, and it's supposedly true. I think he was from, was it Arizona or New Mexico?
I think
or
the car had New Mexico license plates on it when you got it.
New Mexico plates on it when I got it, and the guy I bought it from never took those plates off of there. So it's got a little bit of a ghost story to it. So it's fun. I like that.
Wow.
I choose to believe it's true.
I'm almost sorry I asked.
Yeah.
but I'm not, because when you can find a neat story to a car, whether it's neat, gory, whatever you want to call it, every car to some degree has to have a story, modern, old, or not. And that's part of what keeps the passion of car collecting, of car enthusiasm, keeps that stuff going. So I'm glad that you have that story. I'm certainly sorry for the circumstances around that, but nevertheless, it sounds like it's a pretty good car. And if I'm not mistaken, those are pretty big cars as well.
Oh yeah, it's every bit of 20 feet long. Yeah. It barely fits in a parking space. It is a land barge. It's huge by large, and but it's fun to knock around in. It's also one of those cars, it's a 64. So it's modern enough, to me at least, that it's like driving a regular car. It's not like getting in a Model T or a Model A and you got to adjust the spark knock and the spark and everything. It's got power windows. It has power brakes. It doesn't have AC, but it did originally have AC, heat. All of those bells and whistles, to me, that just make it kind of a regular car. There's nothing, it doesn't feel as antique to me as it might to others. Just something easy to get in and drive. It's still got the original 396 in it with a hydromatic transmission, 3-speed hydromatic transmission. It runs and drives great. It's one of those cars you can get in and drive all day long, and it just keeps pulls and it goes. And it's not a race car. It's just a highway cruiser. And for the ghost story that goes along with it, I knock on wood, it's one of the more reliable older cars I've owned. It's really is. So maybe it needed to be rescued like a puppy, and it needed a good home.
Yeah. And speaking of ghost stories, the car that you own is white. Am I not mistaken?
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. Everything ties, everything comes around full circle, right?
Well, Richard, thanks a ton for hanging out with us today, teaching us a little bit about your art. And we'll make sure everybody can visit Richard and his artwork at STLPinstripes.com and STLPinstripes anywhere on social media.
Yep.
And it'll be pretty cool. You're going to be out at specific events, and we'll let people know about that throughout the year.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be great. And I don't believe, like you said, I don't think you're going to be doing artwork in person, but you'll certainly have a lot of your things for sale.
Yes. If I get a chance, flea markets, swap meets, art shows, things like that, that'll pop up on the socials, and you'll be able to see where I'm going to be and stalk me in real life and hunt me down and find me. So,
well, very cool. Well, thanks for spending some time with us. We learned a lot. It's that time again. Time for Trade Schooled. Through our What Drives Youth initiative and our partnership with the RPM Foundation, we strive to put an emphasis on the value of attending an automotive trade school and passing down information to the next generation of gearheads.
This week on Trade Schooled, John learned something new about the first Shelby Mustangs. John, tell us what you learned.
Well, I learned, and I thought I knew everything about first generation Shelby Mustangs. I did not know that Shelby put traction bars on the rear axle of these Mustangs. He did not put them on the underneath. He put them over the top of the rear axle. Well, you know what's in the way? The floor. All they did was cut a hole in the floor and run the traction bars underneath the rear seat and put a little flap of rubber over the top of the slit. Exhaust fumes, road noise, dirt and debris went right through there. And they ended up updating that and actually eliminating this on the next generation of Shelby models.
Well, that's something. I never knew that. I figured traction bars were always something you ran below the springs.
Yeah, they said they used that because there was a high probability of axle wrap and axle hop, and it sure did work good, but it's hard to have big giant holes in the floor and have a production model car.
Well, and in later years, those Mustangs would get their own factory holes in the floor.
Well, that's from Mother Nature.
If you're thinking about going into the automotive trade, the Get Out and Drive podcast wants to encourage you to check out the RPM Foundation's website and click on the Opportunities tab. You'll find internships, job postings, volunteer opportunities, and summer and gap year programs. Now is the time to start looking for opportunities for the summer. Don't wait.
And don't let the word internship scare you away from a learning opportunity. Some internships are paid, some are not. But what you gain in hands-on experience and the knowledge you take away is priceless. And that's Trade Schooled for this episode. Like I always say, the best way to gain knowledge and information is to learn with your mouth shut.
Cruise on over to our website, Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast, for all the info you never wanted to know about our podcast. Hit us up on our listener hotline, be the first to know what's happening, get industry news, and grab your Get Out and Drive merch. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on Twitter at Get.Out.N.Drive.Pod.
What drives you?
I'm still waiting for my 500 YouTube followers plaque
Right.
from YouTube.
Yeah, keep waiting.
Is the show over yet?
Yes.